I always thought the quiet moments in a home said more than any argument ever could. The way a man closes a door after coming home from work, the sound of his footsteps crossing the hallway, the way he sighs when he settles into his favorite chair. Little things that tell you whether he's carrying love in his heart, or secrets. For 43 years, I believed my husband, Samuel, carried only love. I believed that down to my bones. I believed it when we fought, when we made up, when we danced in the kitchen, and even in the long stretches of silence that came later in life. I never imagined there was anything else behind his eyes. Not a second life. Not a secret past. Certainly not divorce papers. After he passed, the house felt so big I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the walls. I tried keeping myself busy, moving from room to room like I always did, adjusting a pillow here, wiping a counter there. People assume grief is loud, that it comes with wailing and collapsing and dramatic moments, but in truth, it's quiet. It sits in the corners of your home like dust you haven't gotten around to sweeping. It hides in the tea you make for one. It waits for you at the bottom of the stairs you climb alone. Those first 3 weeks after the funeral, I did nothing but try to ignore it. One morning, after the sun slipped through the blinds and painted the floor in soft gold, I woke up and decided to clean Samuel's study. I must have walked past that closed door 100 times since he died, always feeling my stomach twist. That room held too much of him. His cologne lingering in the air, the faint smell of old books and the leather of his armchair. I kept telling myself I wasn't ready to face it, but another part of me whispered that if I didn't go in soon, it would be like he never existed. Grief makes you think strange things. I turned the knob slowly, like I expected someone to be inside. The room greeted me with that familiar scent, and for a moment I had to hold the doorway just to steady myself. His glasses still sat on the desk. His notepad, open to some unfinished grocery list he scribbled the week before he passed. I could trace his handwriting in my sleep. Strong, neat, confident. I touched the page, and before I knew it, tears slid down my cheeks. I wiped them away quickly. I wasn't going to fall apart in every room he ever touched. That would make living impossible. So I took a deep breath and got to work. I dusted the shelves, polished the framed photos, gathered old receipts and notes into neat piles. When I moved to the bottom drawer of his desk, the one where he kept pens and random bits of clutter, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. But when I tugged on it, it wouldn't budge. I frowned and pulled harder. It didn't move. Samuel wasn't the type to lock things. He never hid anything from me. At least, I thought he didn't. My chest tightened as I bent down and noticed something small and metallic wedged between the drawer's edge. A keyhole. A keyhole I had never seen before on a drawer I must have opened hundreds of times through the years. Suddenly my palms felt sweaty. I wiped them on my jeans and looked around the room as if expecting him to appear and tell me to leave it alone. But he wasn't going to appear. And that drawer wasn't locked for nothing. I checked everywhere, the desk shelves, the coffee mug full of pens, the small bowl of paper clips, even under the desk lamp. Nothing. Finally, I noticed a faint scratch mark beneath the drawer's wooden lip. When I crouched down to inspect it, I found a tiny key taped underneath, so old the tape had yellowed. My breath caught. The moment I peeled the key free, I swear the house got quieter. Even the birds outside stopped chirping. I held the key between my fingers, and it felt heavier than it should have, like it was attached to the weight of whatever was waiting inside. I slid it into the drawer lock and turned it slowly. The click echoed through the room. Inside, there was only one thing. A thick manila envelope. No label. No markings. Just my husband's handwriting on the seal. For Samuel only. My stomach dropped. Why would he write that? Why would he hide something from me? Why wasn't I allowed to see it? I pulled the envelope out with trembling hands and opened it. The first thing I saw made my whole world tilt sideways. Divorce papers. Not new ones. Old. 10 years old. Already signed by him but not submitted. My vision blurred so badly I had to blink repeatedly just to focus. His full name. Our marriage date. The division of assets. All of it written as cold as any stranger's contract. I pressed a shaky hand to my chest. My heart felt too big, beating too fast, like it was trying to break out. I whispered, "What is this, Samuel?" The room didn't answer. I kept reading, hoping, praying. There was some explanation tucked inside, but all I found was a second document, folded neatly beneath the divorce forms. A letter. Addressed not to me. Not to a lawyer. But to someone named Elena. My throat closed. I had never heard that name in my life. Not in 43 years of marriage. I unfolded the letter slowly, terrified of what it would say. His handwriting looked rushed, almost sloppy, which was unlike him. And at the top, written in darker ink, was the date. The same year as the divorce papers. My hands shook so badly the paper crinkled as I read the first few lines. I don't know how to begin this. I've lived a lie for too long, and it's time I face you. I'm sorry for leaving you alone all these years. I'm sorry for not being the father you deserved. I froze. Father. Father. My ears rang so loudly I could barely hear my own breath. The words blurred before my eyes. I reread them, desperate to convince myself I misunderstood. But the next lines shattered any hope of that. I promise I will make things right. You have my word that once I set things in order, I will finally acknowledge you. I will give you the life you should have had from the start. My knees nearly buckled. I had to grip the desk just to stay upright. A daughter. He had a daughter. Someone he kept secret for decades. Someone he planned to take care of. And I knew the truth then. Those divorce papers weren't meant to free him from a failing marriage. They were meant to free him from the lie he had been living. To make room for the daughter he'd hidden. I sat down slowly in his chair, the leather cool against my legs. I felt the weight of the entire house pressing down on me. My husband. My partner. The man I cooked for, prayed with, aged beside. He had been planning to leave me. Not because he stopped loving me. No, that would have been easier. But because he thought loving someone else meant he had to let me go. Anger rushed through me like heat rising from the ground in summer. Anger at him. Anger at myself. Anger at every ordinary moment that now felt like a lie. 10 years he carried this secret. 10 years he lived in our house pretending nothing was wrong. 10 years he hid divorce papers in a drawer, waiting for a moment to change both our lives. I didn't even hear the envelope slip from my hand until it hit the floor. I stood slowly, feeling unsteady, and walked to the window. The yard looked the same as always. Quiet, peaceful, like nothing in the world had changed. But inside me, everything had cracked open. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. But the house stayed silent. I sank onto the couch and held the letter he wrote to that woman. Elena, the daughter I never knew about. My fingers traced his handwriting. The loops and curves I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and love notes slipped under my coffee mug in the kitchen on our anniversaries. But this letter wasn't written for me. This letter had nothing to do with me. It was like discovering part of his soul he had barred me from entering. I kept reading. I have everything set in place. The house in your name. The account. The trust. I will not fail you this time. The house in her name? What house? What account? What trust? Had he bought a property behind my back? Created accounts I'd never heard of? Was he planning to leave me financially, emotionally, and physically? My pulse hammered in my ears. I stood abruptly and went back to the drawer. Something inside me, anger, instinct, desperation, wouldn't let me stop searching. I pushed my hand deeper inside and felt the edge of something flat. Another document. This one wasn't in an envelope. It was folded twice and crisp like it had rarely been handled. I pulled it out and unfolded it carefully. A property deed. Not our house. Not any house I recognized. A house located 2 towns over. In the name of Elena Collins, the same name from the letter. Samuel had purchased a home for his secret daughter. I stood frozen in the center of the room, the paper dangling from my hand. The walls seemed to press in around me, closing tight. My breath shortened. My heart raced. Why would he hide this from me? Why not confess? Why not sit me down and tell me the truth? I would have been hurt. God, yes, I would have been gutted, but I would have listened. I would have tried to understand. I would have forgiven him eventually. Maybe. I don't know. But the fact he hid it, planned behind my back, prepared divorce papers years in advance. That cut deeper than anything else. I didn't move for several minutes. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the paper like it was proof that my entire life was something I'd misread. Finally, I sat down again and pulled the divorce papers back onto my lap. I read every line slowly, carefully. Everything was structured to leave me with enough to live on comfortably. Our primary home, half his pension, and a monthly stipend. So he planned to take care of me. He didn't plan to leave me homeless. That was something. But he wanted to separate. He wanted to end us quietly. End our marriage. But he never submitted the paperwork. He never signed on the date line for the court. Only his personal signature was there. And that's when it hit me. He changed his mind. Or he ran out of time. And I didn't know which was worse. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to calm the storm inside me. I didn't notice the tears until one dripped onto the paper. I wiped them away angrily. I didn't want to cry anymore. But then the doorbell rang. My heart lurched. No one was supposed to visit today. No deliveries. No family. No neighbors had any reason to stop by. My body moved on its own. I stood, walked to the hallway, and approached the door slowly. Through the frosted glass, I could see the outline of a woman. Young. Maybe early 20s. Slim, with long hair pulled back. My stomach twisted. I opened the door halfway and froze. She looked just like Samuel. Her eyes. Her nose. Her chin. It was like looking at a younger version of him, standing on my porch with a nervous smile and a letter clutched in her hand. "Mrs. Jefferson?" she asked softly. My voice caught. I could barely breathe. She lifted the letter toward me. He left this for you." My world tilted again. And everything I thought I understood shattered all over. I stood there in the doorway, frozen in place. The young woman held the letter out to me with both hands, like she was offering something fragile. Something she didn't want to drop or damage. Something that didn't belong to her. Her fingers trembled. Mine did too. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. The air between us felt thick enough to cut with a knife. She lifted her eyes to meet mine, and I saw the unmistakable familiarity there. The same warm brown as Samuel's, the same slight downward tilt, the same quiet sadness living behind them. My heart thudded painfully. I cleared my throat, though it felt raw. Who are you?" She swallowed. "My name is Elena." The name hit me like a slap. The same name written on the letter I had just read. The same name tied to the house deed my husband secretly purchased. My breath grew short. I gripped the edge of the door tighter, steadying myself. "Why are you here?" She looked down at her shoes for a long moment before answering. "Because I think we need to talk." Her voice cracked a little. "I didn't come here to hurt you. I promise." My whole body went cold. Hurt me. That word felt like a cruel joke. The hurt had already happened 10 years ago, and I just didn't know it. I stepped back slightly, unsure whether to let her in or shut the door. I didn't know what I was more afraid of, what she knew or what she might say. "Please," she added softly. "I just want to explain." Explain. The word made something inside me twist. My mind swirled with questions, emotions slamming into each other so fast I couldn't separate anger from confusion, or heartbreak from curiosity. But one thing I knew for certain. I wasn't going to have this conversation standing at my front door where the neighbors could peek and gossip. "Come in," I whispered, almost involuntarily, stepping aside. She slipped inside quietly, like she didn't want to make her presence felt any more than necessary. She stood there near the entryway, clutching the letter to her chest, eyes scanning the walls, the photos, the furniture, like she was searching for pieces of a life she didn't get to be part of. I closed the door gently and turned to face her. "Sit." It came out sharper than I intended, but she nodded immediately and sank into one of the dining chairs. I sat across from her. My hands rested on the table, fingers intertwined tightly because if I let them loose, they would tremble. I felt her studying me for a moment, trying to understand me just as I was trying to understand her. She placed the letter on the table and slid it toward me. He told me to bring this to you one day," she said quietly. "If something happened to him." My stomach coiled. If something happened. As if he'd been preparing for that possibility. As if he'd known something he never shared with me. I stared at the envelope. It was sealed, Samuel's handwriting stretched across the front in neat, careful strokes. "For my wife." It felt unreal. He had written to her, and to me. One letter for the daughter he kept secret, one for the wife he grew old beside. 2 lives. 2 stories. 2 truths. I placed a hand on the envelope but didn't open it. Not yet. I had questions to ask first. Questions boiling inside me. "How long have you known about him?" I asked, my voice low, controlled. She clasped her hands together and took a breath. "My whole life." I blinked. My whole life. That meant she must have been born before Samuel and I married. That part one already suspected. But the thought of him living with that secret, not for a few years, but for decades, clawed at me. My throat tightened. She continued. "My mom told me about him when I was 7. She said he wasn't a bad man. That he was just scared. That he wasn't ready to ruin the life he'd built. He had you. He had a career. And he had obligations." My jaw clenched. Obligations. That was her word. Obligations. That's what our marriage, the life we built, looked like from the outside? Something that tied him down from doing what he apparently wanted? I looked down so she wouldn't see the anger in my eyes. She kept going, voice softening. "But she also told me that he loved me. In his own way. That he thought about me. That one day, when the time was right, he'd be part of my life." Her lips twitched, like she was trying not to cry. I waited for that day. I felt something shift in my chest. A strange mixture of pity and resentment swirled inside me. And when did he finally meet you? I asked. She hesitated. When I was 22. That meant, just 8 years ago. Meaning for more than half her life, he had stayed away, distant, hiding from both sides. My jaw tightened again. Why then? I pressed. Why suddenly after so long? She looked at me with quiet sadness. He found out he was sick. My breath froze. He was sick. She nodded as if she could hear the question echo in my head. He told me everything. He said he'd just gotten the diagnosis. Said he didn't want to leave this world with regrets. Her fingers tightened together. Said he wanted to take care of me, even if he couldn't do it openly. My ears buzzed. The room felt like it was slowly tilting to one side. What diagnosis? I managed to whisper. Pancreatic cancer, she said softly. Late stage. My mouth went dry. I leaned back in the chair, lightheaded. He never told me. He never told me he was dying. He didn't even give me the chance to hold him through it. To help him. To be there. My eyes stung. I swallowed hard. He told you, I said bitterly. But not me. She lifted her eyes to mine, guilt settling in her expression. He didn't want you to suffer. I laughed, short and bitter. Suffer? What exactly did he think this is? She looked down. The silence stretched painfully between us. I forced myself to steady my breathing, to quiet the storm inside me enough to ask more questions. What about the divorce papers? Did he ever mention those to you? She nodded slowly. He told me he thought about leaving you once. Years ago. Not because he didn't love you, but because he wanted to bring me into his life without lying to either of you. Lying to either of us. And yet he chose to lie to both of us instead. I rubbed my forehead. And what stopped him? Her eyes softened. You. The word landed like a stone in my chest. He said he couldn't break your heart. He said you gave him a home he didn't think he deserved. He said you were his best friend. Her voice trembled. He said he was a coward for even thinking about leaving. I stared at her, speechless. So he stayed, she continued. But he promised me he'd make sure I'd be okay. That he'd set up everything quietly. Just then, I remembered the property deed. The trust account he mentioned in the letter. All the things I stumbled across without warning. All the things he had prepared for her while pretending life was normal with me. I felt a wave of grief, betrayal, and confusion crash over me. I gripped the edge of the table to keep myself tethered. What did you want from him? I asked, voice cracking. She blinked, startled. Nothing. I never asked for money. Or houses. Or anything. I only wanted a father. Her voice broke. A real father. Someone who showed up for me. Someone who didn't hide me. I closed my eyes for a moment. Because as much as I wanted to hate her, I heard the truth in her voice. And I knew what it felt like to want something from Samuel he didn't always know how to give. She shifted painfully in her chair. And I didn't come here to take anything from you, she whispered. I came because he told me you deserved the truth. And he wanted you to read that letter when you were ready. My gaze shifted to the envelope sitting on the table between us. For my wife. My breath shook. Why now? I asked. Why today? She hesitated. Because I didn't know if I had the right to come sooner. I didn't want to disrespect you. I didn't want to show up while you were grieving and make it worse. A tear slipped down her cheek. But when I heard the funeral had passed, I realized I was out of time too. She sniffed softly. I didn't want to regret anything. I looked away, blinking rapidly. Because regret was something I suddenly understood better than ever. The clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. I felt the weight of everything pressing hard against my ribcage. I reached for the envelope slowly. My fingers trembled as I slid my thumb under the seal. I heard her inhale shakily. I pulled out the letter and unfolded it. The room seemed to hold its breath as I began to read. My love. If you are reading this, it means I was too much of a coward to tell you the truth while I was alive. My hands shook. He knew. He knew what this would do to me. I want to start by saying this. I loved you. Every day. Every moment. Even when I failed you. Even when I let fear make my decisions. My eyes blurred. I blinked hard and kept reading. There is something I never told you. Something I was ashamed of. Something I should have shared with you decades ago. Before I met you, before I ever knew I would build a life with you, I had a child. A daughter. The word stabbed through my chest, even though I already knew. When we married, I was scared to lose you. Scared to lose the life we dreamed of. I kept telling myself there would be a right time to confess, but I never found the courage. And the longer I hid it, the harder it became. I felt my throat close. I did not stay with you out of duty. I stayed because you were the only home I ever knew. But I could not leave this world without acknowledging her. Without helping her. I swallowed painfully. I wanted to make space in my life for both of you. I just didn't realize I was running out of time. My breath hitched. Forgive me for hurting you. Forgive me for being selfish. Forgive me for not trusting you with the truth when you deserved it most. The last line brought fresh tears. Please don't hate her. Hate me instead. The letter slipped from my fingers and fluttered onto the table. I covered my mouth, trying not to sob. Across from me, Elena sat silently, tears streaming down her face. We stayed like that for a long moment, two women grieving the same man in two very different ways. Finally, I whispered. He should have told me. She whispered back. He should have told me too. And for the first time since she arrived, I didn't see Samuel's secret. I saw a young woman just as abandoned by the truth as I was. I don't know how long we sat there at the table, me with Samuel's letter limp in my hand, her with her eyes red and downcast. It felt like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide what kind of woman I was going to be now. Angry, forgiving, broken, strong. Or maybe all of those at once. I didn't know anymore. I wiped my cheeks slowly and forced myself to inhale, though my chest still felt tight. When I finally lifted my head, she was watching me with a kind of careful fear, like she expected me to throw her out, scream, collapse, something. Instead, I just stared at her, trying to see her not as a betrayal, not as a reminder of Samuel's secrets, but as a real person. A young woman who didn't ask to be born into a lie. She looked away first, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. A part of me wanted to scream at her. What are you sorry for? You didn't do this. He did. But the words wouldn't come. My anger wasn't clean or sharp. It was tangled, messy, drowning in confusion. So instead, I said the only true thing I could manage. I don't know what to feel about you yet. She nodded, accepting the uncertainty like she expected nothing more. I understand. I picked up Samuel's letter again, but I didn't open it. I couldn't reread anything. Not yet. My eyes drifted to the clock on the wall. Time was moving, even if everything else felt frozen. What do you want from me? She lifted her head slowly, confused. Nothing. I'm not here for money. I'm not here to claim anything. I wanted you to know I exist. And I wanted to hear something about him from someone who actually knew him. My throat tightened again. You didn't know him? She bit her lower lip, shaking her head. Not really. I met him a handful of times. Mostly short visits. He was distant at first. Nervous. Like he didn't know how to be around me. Her shoulders dropped. I used to think he didn't want me. That he regretted meeting me. But I realize now he was scared. And sick. And guilty. I stared at the table for a long moment. He wasn't perfect with me for a long time either, I murmured. I used to think that was just marriage. Now I know it was something else entirely. She looked at me gently. He talked about you all the time. My heart stuttered. What? She nodded. He told me he loved you. That you were the love of his life. He said you deserved better than the truth he never gave you. My chin trembled. That sounded like Samuel. Loving me and hurting me in the same breath. What did he say about me? I whispered, almost afraid to know. She hesitated, then folded her hands in her lap. He said leaving you would have broken him. That he could disappoint himself, he could disappoint anyone, but he couldn't disappoint you. He couldn't watch your face when he told you he'd been lying for years. A deep, painful ache spread in my chest. He'd stayed because he loved me. And he'd lied because he loved me. And neither of those truths helped me breathe any easier. I stood suddenly, needing to move. The room felt too small. The air too heavy. Excuse me, I murmured, and walked toward the living room. She didn't follow. I appreciated that. I stopped in front of the fireplace where Samuel's photo sat, a picture from our 30th anniversary. He looked handsome and strong, and I looked at him like he was my whole world. I touched the frame lightly, feeling the cool glass under my fingertips. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered again. But the photo stayed silent. Behind me, I heard the soft scrape of a chair. I can leave if you want, she said from the dining room. I didn't mean to overwhelm you. And go where? I asked without turning. Back to the life he tried to build in secret. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "I don't have much of a life. My mom died 2 years ago. I only had him for a few years, and then he got sick." I turned slowly. She looked suddenly young, small, lost. Not a threat. Not an enemy. Just a girl who grew up without a father, and then found one only to lose him again. "What happened to the house?" I asked, surprising myself. She blinked. "What house?" "The one he bought for you." Confusion crossed her face. "I never lived in any house he bought me." My eyebrows knit. "He put a deed in your name." She shook her head firmly. "I don't have anything like that." I frowned. "It's in the drawer. I found it with the divorce papers." She stood slowly, hesitation visible in her every movement. "Can I see it?" I nodded and led her back to the study. The room still smelled like Samuel, and for a moment, I felt both comforted and betrayed by that scent. I opened the drawer and handed her the deed. She stared at it, her eyes widening. "This is the address of a house I've never even seen." "Are you sure?" I pressed. "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "He never mentioned anything about buying me a house. He always said he was setting things in motion, but I had no idea he meant this." We stood there in silence, the weight of this new piece of the puzzle sinking in. Something wasn't lining up. Samuel had bought a house for her, but never told her. He hadn't submitted the divorce papers. He hadn't given her the deed. All his plans were half-finished, abandoned, hidden. It was like he was preparing for a future he never got the chance to finish. I sat slowly on the edge of the couch. "He was planning something bigger," I murmured. "Something he didn't get to complete." She sank into the chair across from me. "Maybe he ran out of time." That sentence struck me harder than anything else she'd said. I pressed the deed to my chest, squeezing my eyes shut. "Why didn't he tell me he was sick?" She shook her head. "He said he didn't want you spending your final years together taking care of a dying man." My stomach twisted painfully. That was my choice to make, not his. Her voice softened. "I think he knew that's exactly what you would have said." I let the silence linger. My breaths grew shallow. The reality of it all, his secrets, his fear, his sickness, settled over me like a heavy blanket. Every memory felt different now. Every quiet moment in our last years together had a shadow behind it. She looked around the study, eyes resting on the photos on the shelves. "He kept pictures of you everywhere," she said. "I saw them even in his apartment. He never stopped loving you." I blinked. "Apartment?" She froze, like she'd said something she shouldn't have. "What apartment?" I asked slowly. She took a deep breath. "He rented a small place. Not to live in permanently, but for days he didn't want to worry you. When he was feeling sick. When he needed treatments." My hands went cold. "Treatments?" She nodded. "He tried chemo, but it didn't help much. He didn't want you to see him weak. He didn't want you to think your husband was disappearing." My jaw trembled. He was disappearing. And I didn't even know. "Show me," I whispered. "Show me where he stayed." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" "No," I admitted. "But I need to see it anyway." She nodded slowly. "I can take you there." I grabbed my coat, my purse, and the letter he left for me. She waited patiently, like she understood that every movement I made felt heavy, like walking underwater. We stepped outside into the afternoon sun. The world looked so normal. Cars passing. Children laughing down the street. Birds flying overhead. And somehow, none of it matched the hurricane inside me. I drove. She gave directions. It was only 15 minutes away, in an older part of town where houses were small but well-loved, where porches sagged a bit and trees cast long shadows over cracked sidewalks. We pulled up to a small, pale blue house with white trim. It looked humble, quiet, lonely. "Here," she said softly. "He came here when he felt too sick to let you see." I stepped out of the car slowly, my legs shaky. The yard had overgrown grass and an old mailbox leaning to one side. It looked like a place someone used but didn't live in. Elena watched me carefully as I approached the door. She had a key. I didn't ask how she got it. I didn't want to know. When she unlocked it and pushed the door open, I hesitated for a long moment before stepping inside. The air smelled faintly of medicine. And lemon cleaner. And something that made my heart ache, Samuel's cologne. He had lived here. Suffered here. Hidden here. For me. Or for fear of me. I didn't know which. Inside was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with peeling paint and fading furniture. But everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of him. A sweater draped over a chair, a mug on the counter, a blanket on the couch, and on the coffee table, a photo of me. The same picture we took at our wedding anniversary, framed and polished, placed where he could see it every single day. My breath hitched. My hand flew to my mouth again. He loved you, she said softly from behind me. Even when he was trying to protect you. Even when he was lying. I stared at the picture until my vision blurred with tears. I don't know whether to miss him, I whispered, or hate him. Her voice trembled. I feel the same. I turned to her slowly. For the first time, our eyes met not as rivals, not as strangers, but as two people broken by the same man's choices. Two people who wanted the same thing. A truth he didn't have the courage to give us while he was alive. And in that little house, in the shadow of his regret, a strange and painful bond began to take shape. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that photograph on the coffee table. My fingers hovered above it, afraid to touch it, like it might burn me. It felt wrong that this picture, this memory, lived in a place I never knew existed, a place he came to hide from me. A place he suffered alone. He used to sit right there, Elena whispered behind me, pointing to the worn couch. Sometimes for hours. Sometimes he wouldn't speak for a long time, but I could tell he was thinking of you. He always had that picture nearby. My chest tightened so hard I had to sit down. I sank onto the chair opposite the couch, the room tilting slightly as I tried to steady my breath. I don't understand why he did it this way, I finally said. Why he made a whole separate life. Why he thought secrecy was kinder. Elena walked to the window and looked outside, her arms wrapped around herself. He said he felt trapped between two worlds, two truths, and he didn't want to hurt either one. She turned around slowly, but he ended up hurting both. The truth of it hit me with the force of a wave. Yes, that was exactly what he'd done. And now the pieces of his choices were scattered across two lives that never touched, until now. I stood and walked slowly into the bedroom. The light was dim, the curtains drawn halfway. The bed was neatly made, as if someone had tidied it before leaving, as if Samuel had been preparing for company that never came. A folded sweater lay on top of the dresser, one I remembered buying him 5 Christmases ago. He'd worn it here, alone. I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was a stack of medical papers, appointment cards, prescriptions with his name on them. One was dated only a month before he died. He had been coming here for treatment, for rest, for solitude, but not for me. I held the paper tightly until it crumpled in my hand. My heart felt like it was cracking open all over again. How many nights had he told me he was working late? How many times had he pretended he was fine at dinner? How many moments had I missed where he was quietly fighting for his life? I heard footsteps behind me. Elena stood in the doorway. He didn't want you to see him weak. I turned sharply. Weakness isn't something you hide from the person you married. She lowered her gaze. He didn't understand that. Not the way you do. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the mattress sink beneath me. It was softer than ours at home. Newer. Not filled with decades of memories and dreams and the weight of two bodies aging together. This is where he came to die, I whispered. She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't have to. My eyes caught a notebook sitting on the dresser. I reached for it slowly. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. Inside, his handwriting filled the pages. Journal entries, short notes, thoughts he never shared with me. I flipped to a page in the middle. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctor doesn't want to tell me. I can't stop thinking about her. My wife. How do I look her in the eye knowing I've lied for so long? I blinked back tears, forcing myself to keep reading. She looked at me today the way she always has, like I'm her whole world. And all I could think was how badly I've failed her. I want to tell her. God, I want to tell her. But every time I try, I see the hurt on her face before I even say the words. My hand trembled as I turned the page. And Elena, she deserves a father. She deserves a family. She deserves a life I didn't give her. I hate myself for it. I pressed my palm to my forehead, pain spreading behind my eyes. It felt like reading a confession he never made to my face. A grief he carried in silence. A punishment he gave himself instead of being honest. He was broken, Elena whispered. He didn't know how to fix it. I closed the notebook gently. He should have tried. She nodded but didn't argue. We left the bedroom and moved back into the living room. I sat on the couch this time. She sat beside me, but not too close, respecting whatever boundaries existed between us in that moment. How did your mother handle all of this? I asked quietly. Her lips pressed together. She loved him. Even though she knew he'd never fully be hers. She never asked him for anything. Not money. Not attention. Not promises. Maybe that's why he trusted her with so much of the truth. And what about you? I asked. Did you ever resent me? Her eyes widened. No. Never. She shook her head firmly. I used to imagine you as this perfect woman he loved so much he couldn't bear to leave. My mom always said you were kind. That you didn't deserve to be hurt. That none of this was your fault. A strange feeling swirled inside me. Gratitude mixed with shame, mixed with something I didn't have a name for. Your mother sounds like a better person than I would have been, I murmured. She smiled sadly. She had her moments. So did he. So do we. I leaned back against the couch, watching dust motes float through the sunlight. What happens now? She looked at her hands. I don't know. She glanced at me cautiously. What do you want to happen? I sighed, a long shaky sigh that emptied something deep inside me. I want to understand him. I want to forgive him. But I don't know how long that will take. She nodded. I don't expect anything from you. I know, I replied. And that makes this harder. Because if you had come here demanding things, I could have been angry at you. But you're just, you, lost in this same mess. She looked up, her eyes shining. Do you want me to leave? No, I said immediately. Then softer, not yet. She relaxed just a little. Okay. We sat there in silence for a long while, listening to the faint sounds of the street outside. The world continued turning, unaware of the earthquake happening in this tiny blue house. I looked over at her again. Do you have anyone? Friends? Family besides him? She hesitated, then shook her head. Not really. I work a lot. I keep to myself. I studied her face, the slight resemblance to Samuel, the softness around her eyes, the tremble in her fingers. How old are you? I asked. 28, she said. 28. 28 years of a life lived in the shadows of a secret. A life shaped by absence more than presence. And suddenly, I realized something that made my stomach twist. I'm older than your mother would have been, I murmured. She nodded gently. Yes. I looked away, trying to tamp down the waves of emotion stirring inside me. Betrayal, compassion, confusion, grief. They all blended into something raw and overwhelming. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with you, I admitted quietly. She nodded, accepting that too. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with you either. And then, something unexpected happened. We both laughed. Not loudly. Not joyfully. But in that tired, broken way people laugh when everything is too complicated to cry about anymore. It was the first moment of strange, fragile connection between us. Eventually, she stood. I should go. You've had enough for one day. I nodded. Probably. She walked to the door and paused. If you ever want to talk again, or if you want to ask me anything, I'll answer honestly. I nodded slowly. Thank you. She gave me a small, sad smile. He loved you, she said again, even when he didn't know how to show it. Then she opened the door and stepped outside into the fading afternoon light. I stood in the doorway watching her walk down the path, her figure shrinking until she reached the sidewalk and disappeared around the corner. I closed the door quietly. Then I went back inside that little house, Samuel's secret house, and sat on the couch again. I picked up the picture frame and pressed it to my chest. Why didn't you let me carry this with you? I whispered into the empty air. Of course, there was no answer. But for the first time, the silence didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like the beginning of understanding. I stayed in that little blue house until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the floor. I didn't mean to stay that long, but something inside me wouldn't let me leave. Not until I understood what this place meant. Not until I felt the truth settle somewhere inside me instead of just circling like a restless storm. I walked around slowly, touching things he touched, seeing the choices he made when he wasn't home with me. A blanket neatly folded on the couch. A half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. A grocery list stuck to the fridge with a magnet. The list made my heart twist. Eggs. Milk. Pain pills. Oatmeal. Call Elena. The last line was circled 3 times. My breath shook as I reached out and touched the paper. The thought that he wrote this here, alone, scared, sick, felt like a bruise blooming inside my chest. I opened the fridge. Bottled water. A carton of soup. A few leftovers. Nothing that looked like someone truly lived here. Just enough to get by. To survive day by day. I closed it gently. His shoes sat by the door, worn but neatly placed side by side, the way he always did at home. I knelt and ran my hand over the leather. It was so warm and alive a moment ago, in my memory. Now it just felt like something a ghost left behind. I whispered, "Samuel, what did you think you were protecting me from?" The house stayed quiet except for the soft creak of old wood. After a while, I couldn't stay in that space any longer. My heart felt too big for my chest, and my mind felt too crowded. I locked the door behind me and walked out into the evening air. The world felt different now, like it had shifted slightly, and I was trying to find my balance again. When I got home, the house felt too clean, too quiet, too organized. Like a museum of a life that had partly been a lie. I went straight to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and took out the letter again. I read the ending this time. If I could start over, I would have told you everything. I would have trusted you. But I was afraid, of losing you, of hurting her, of destroying the life we built. I failed both of you. All I can ask is that you try to understand why I made the choices I did. I closed my eyes. Understanding wasn't the problem. The problem was living with it. I laid the letter on the dresser and crawled into bed, fully dressed. I didn't bother turning off the lamp. I just stared at the ceiling, waiting for exhaustion to finally pull me under. But sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw different versions of him. Laughing with me, sick in that house, sitting with Elena, writing letters he never had the courage to deliver. I must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I knew, morning light was trickling through the curtains. My eyes felt puffy. My head felt heavy. My heart felt tired. I forced myself out of bed and went to the kitchen. I made coffee like I always did. Measured the grounds, filled the water, pressed the button. The machine hummed softly. Routine. Familiar. But nothing about this felt familiar anymore. The knock came just as the coffee finished brewing. I froze. Not again, I thought. Another knock. Softer this time. I slowly walked to the door and opened it a crack. It wasn't Elena. It was a man. Tall, maybe in his 50s, with grey streaks in his hair and a worn expression. He looked nervous. Too nervous for someone I didn't know. "Mrs. Jefferson?" he asked. My chest tightened. "Yes." He let out a small breath like he'd been holding it. "My name is Marcus. I worked with your husband. We were close. And I think I owe you an explanation." My stomach dropped. What kind of explanation? He looked over his shoulder, then back at me. "One he never gave you." I hesitated a moment before stepping back and opening the door wider. "Come in." He stepped inside awkwardly, hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. He looked around the living room, taking in the framed photos, the quietness, the faint lingering scent of lemon cleaner. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said gently. Samuel was complicated. But he was a good man. I almost laughed. Good. Good men don't hide whole lives. Good men don't write divorce papers in secret. But then again, good and imperfect can live in the same person. I had learned that the hard way. "Why are you here?" I asked, voice steady. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I knew about Elena." My breath caught. "You did." He nodded. "For years. Before she ever met him." My knees felt weak. I leaned against the arm of the couch. "How?" I asked. "He told me," Marcus said softly. "I was the only one he trusted at work. He used to come to my office late at night when he couldn't sleep. He'd sit in the chair across from mine and talk until his voice went hoarse. About me." I whispered. "Yes. About you. About her. About the guilt eating him alive." My eyes burned. I crossed my arms over my chest to steady myself. "He asked me once," Marcus continued, "how you'd react if he told you everything. I told him the truth, that honesty hurts, but dishonesty kills. And he said, it'll kill her either way." My breath hitched. "He didn't mean it literally," Marcus added quickly. "He meant your heart. He said you loved him too deeply. That you'd blame yourself. That you'd ask what you did wrong." I closed my eyes, because that's exactly what I had asked myself the moment I saw those papers. Marcus's voice softened. "He didn't tell you because he didn't want to see your love turn into pain directed at him." "That was selfish," I said quietly. "Desperately so," he agreed. He was terrified. Of losing you. Of facing the consequences of his choices. He loved you, Mrs. Jefferson, but he was a coward when it came to the truth. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words were too sharp, too close to everything I had been thinking but didn't want to say out loud. "He used that small house as a place to fall apart," Marcus said. "Because he didn't want to fall apart in front of you." I pressed my lips together. But I would have taken care of him. I know, he said gently. And he knew. That's why he didn't want that for you. I shook my head slowly. He didn't trust me enough to handle the truth. He trusted you to love him, Marcus said. And that's what scared him. I opened my eyes and stared at him. Did you know about the divorce papers? He let out a long breath. Yes. I told him not to file them. I blinked. Why? Because he wasn't leaving you, Marcus said firmly. He was just panicking. He wanted a clean slate for his daughter, but he never intended to hurt you like that. He just didn't know how to bring two halves of his life together. I covered my mouth with my hand. Tears blurred my vision again. He wanted to fix everything, Marcus said softly. But by the time he found the courage, he was already sick. Already weak. Already out of time. I sank onto the couch. Marcus sat across from me quietly, giving me space to absorb the weight of everything. After a long moment I asked, "Why come now?" He hesitated. "Because I saw her leave your house yesterday." My breath caught. "You saw Elena?" He nodded. She looked shaken. And I realized, nobody told you the full story. You deserve to hear it from someone who saw the guilt eating him alive. A long silence filled the room before he added, "He loved you." That was the one thing he never questioned. I pressed my hands to my face, letting the tears fall freely. Because those words, those simple, painful words, hurt and healed at the same time. After a few minutes, I lowered my hands and looked at Marcus. "Thank you," I whispered, "for telling me." He nodded and stood. "If you ever need anything, or if you want to talk more about him, I'm here." I walked him to the door. He paused before leaving. "One more thing," he said. "Everything he did, the secrets, the fear, even the house, it wasn't because he didn't love you. It was because he loved you too much, and didn't know how to be honest without losing you." Then he stepped outside and walked away. I closed the door slowly, leaning my forehead against the wood. I thought I had reached the end of the truth. But now I realized. The hardest part was still ahead. I stayed against that door for a long time after Marcus left, letting the quiet settle around me like dust. Every breath felt heavy, loaded with truths I wasn't ready to carry but couldn't set down either. My home, our home, felt different now. Not tainted, but changed. Like it held two histories instead of one. I walked slowly into the kitchen, the way you walk into a room after waking from a dream you're afraid to understand too clearly. The coffee from earlier sat cold in the pot. I poured it out and reached for a glass of water instead, my hands trembling just enough that it sloshed slightly over the rim. I kept hearing Marcus's voice echoing in my mind. He loved you. He just didn't know how to tell the truth without losing you. Love shouldn't hurt this much, I thought. But maybe long love, the kind that stretches decades and carries scars, always comes with hidden fractures. I sat at the table and stared at my hands. They looked older today. More fragile. Worn down by secrets I didn't ask for. I didn't notice the tears falling until one hit the back of my knuckle. I wiped it away slowly. Then the phone rang. The sound jolted me so sharply I nearly knocked over the glass. I reached for the receiver, heart pounding. "Hello." A hesitant voice answered. "Mrs. Jefferson. It's me, Elena." My grip tightened. "Are you all right?" There was a pause. "I don't know. Can we talk?" I closed my eyes. I should have said no. My heart was already bruised enough for one lifetime. But something inside me, maybe compassion, maybe curiosity, maybe just exhaustion, told me she wasn't calling for herself. "Yes," I said quietly. "Where are you?" "Outside," she whispered. "In my car." I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Her car was parked at the curb. She stepped out slowly, shoulders hunched, looking smaller than she did yesterday. When she reached the porch, I noticed her hands were shaking. She clutched something to her chest, a small, rectangular object wrapped in cloth. "Come inside," I murmured. She followed me in, her eyes wide and uncertain, like she still wasn't sure she had the right to breathe the same air as me. We sat in the living room, across from each other again. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she unwrapped the cloth. It was a phone. An old, worn phone. Samuel's phone. My breath caught. "Where did you get that?" "He gave it to me," she whispered. "The last day I saw him. He told me. He said if anything happened to him, I should give this to you." My heartbeat stumbled. "What's on it?" "I don't know the passcode," she said, voice barely audible. "He didn't tell me. He said you would know." I stared at the phone, the room blurring at the edges. I reached for it slowly. The moment it touched my palm, Something inside me broke open. The weight of it felt familiar. The scratches on the case. The faint smell of his cologne embedded in the leather. This was the phone he kept separate from the one he used at home. His secret phone. I held down the button to turn it on. A faint vibration. The screen lit up. Enter passcode. My throat tightened. What passcode would he expect me to know? Our anniversary. His birthday. My birthday. The year we met. My fingers hovered uncertainly. I tried our anniversary first. Wrong. I tried his birthday. Wrong. I tried my birthday. Wrong. The phone locked for a minute. I placed it gently on the table, exhaling shakily. I don't know, I whispered. Elena looked away, her expression sinking. Maybe he didn't want either of us to see. I shook my head slowly. He gave it to you for me. He wanted me to see something. And then I froze. 8 digits. 8 numbers Samuel used for everything sentimental. The date of his mother's death. A date he always said shaped him, changed him, taught him to love fiercely because loss could come without warning. My fingers trembled as I entered it. The screen unlocked. A breath escaped me. A small broken sound that wasn't quite a sob, but not far from one. Elena covered her mouth. A single folder sat in the phone's home screen. Titled simply, For You. I touched it. Inside were videos. Dozens of them. All labeled by date. All recorded in that small blue house. My lungs felt too tight to breathe. Do you want me to leave? She whispered. I shook my head. Stay. I opened the first video. There he was. Samuel. Sitting on that worn couch, wearing the same sweater I saw in the bedroom. He looked tired. Thin. But his eyes, the eyes I'd loved since the day I met him, were soft. He swallowed hard, looked into the camera, and smiled a little. Hey baby, he said quietly. I don't know if you'll ever see this. God knows I'm praying you won't. But if you are, I guess that means time caught up to me. My vision wavered. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I should have told you everything, he said. I should have trusted you with the truth. But every time I tried, I saw your face in my mind, your disappointment, your pain, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the reason your eyes lost that softness. He laughed bitterly. Maybe that makes me a coward. I think I am. My fingers clutched the phone tighter. But I love you. God, I love you more than I have words for. His voice cracked. And I wanted you to know that before anything else. The video ended. I covered my mouth with my other hand. Tears streamed down my face. Elena wiped her cheeks silently. I opened the next video. He was sitting in the same spot, but he looked a little worse. Paler. More tired. His hands shook slightly as he folded them together. I met her today, he whispered. My daughter. Our daughter. I know she's not yours, but she should have been. I should have told you. I should have made space in our lives for her. But I was afraid. Afraid you'd walk away. I couldn't bear that. Not after all these years. He shook his head. I'm trying to do right by her. And by you. But I'm running out of time. I paused the video, choking on a sob. Elena whispered, I didn't know he recorded those. I nodded slowly. I didn't know he recorded anything. I opened another video. His breathing was labored this time. I bought her a house, he murmured. Nothing fancy. Just somewhere safe. Somewhere she can build a life. But I don't have the strength to tell her. Not yet. God help me, I'm such a fool. He closed his eyes. If you're watching this, forgive me. Forgive the man I was. The man I became. Forgive the choices I made trying to protect everyone and hurting everyone instead. I pressed the phone to my chest. Elena reached for my free hand. I didn't pull away. Hours passed. We watched every video. Every confession. Every raw moment of fear, love, guilt, and regret. We watched him fade slowly video by video, until the last one, just a week before he died. He was barely recognizable. Half shadow. Half man. But his eyes still held tenderness. I love you, he whispered. Both of you. The screen went black. I didn't know how long I cried. Elena cried too. Two women on opposite sides of a secret man, grieving the same loss in different languages of pain. When I could finally breathe, she whispered, I didn't think he loved me that much. He did, I said softly. And he loved me too. Just imperfectly. We sat there in silence, letting the truth settle like dust on old furniture. Eventually, she asked quietly, what happens now? I inhaled slowly, deeply. We figure it out, I said. Together. She wiped her eyes. You really want me in your life? I looked at her carefully, at her trembling hands, her tired eyes, her hope, her fear. You're the last piece of him I have left, I whispered. And I won't lose you too. She broke into tears. But this time, they weren't the same kind of tears. They were soft, relieved, healing. She leaned forward, and slowly, hesitantly, I wrapped my arms around her. Her body shook against mine, and for the first time, comforting her didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like closure. It felt like forgiveness. It felt like beginning again. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Thank you." I shook my head. No, thank him. He brought us together in the end. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. As she stood to leave, I walked her to the door. "Come back tomorrow," I said. "We'll talk more." She smiled, a small, fragile smile filled with possibility. "I will." When the door closed behind her, I stood still in the hallway, looking around my quiet home. For the first time since Samuel died, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of truth. Full of pain. Full of healing. Full of the kind of love that outlives mistakes. I walked to the bedroom, placed the phone beside his picture frame, and whispered, "I forgive you." Because forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me.